Reddit is a treasure trove for those who love a good scare, with numerous communities dedicated to sharing spine-chilling tales. Among the most popular are nosleep and ScaryStories, where users post their own eerie experiences and fictional horror stories. These stories range from unsettling encounters and paranormal activities to psychological thrillers and urban legends. Whether you're looking for a quick fright or a deep dive into the macabre, Reddit's creepy stories offer a diverse array of hair-raising content that will keep you on the edge of your seat. A Reddit user shared a chilling memory of narrowly avoiding a potential abduction as a child. While raking rocks in his aunt's yard at age 7, a man in a beat-up pickup truck stopped, pretended to tinker under the hood, and asked if the boy knew how to pop a clutch. Having grown up on a farm, the boy confidently said yes, and started walking toward the truck to help. At the last moment, his mother called him back into the house. He turned, heard the truck door slam, and saw the man speed off. The user didn't think much of the incident until 30 years later. While lying in bed, the memory resurfaced, and he realized with horrifying clarity. The man had likely been trying to kidnap him. The realization left him shaken for hours, haunted by what could have happened if his mother hadn't intervened in time. Last weekend, I decided to tackle the attic. It's been years since anyone touched the boxes up there, and with the holidays coming, I figured it was time to clear out some space. Amid the usual clutter, old clothes, photo albums, and broken furniture, I found a phone tucked inside an old shoebox. It was a flip phone, scratched and faded, but not ancient. It looked like one of those models from the early 2000s. I couldn't remember ever owning one like it, but I figured it might have been my dad's or something. Out of curiosity, I opened it. To my surprise, it powered on. The screen was dim but functional. No passcode or anything. The phone's menu was nearly empty. No contacts, no apps, nothing except a handful of text messages in the inbox. The messages were strange. "Where are you? I'm waiting. Don't leave me here." The timestamps showed they'd been sent years ago, but the phone had no SIM card, and I couldn't find any sent messages or outgoing calls. I assumed it was some old glitch or maybe leftover data from the previous owner. Still, it made me uncomfortable. I left the phone in the attic and went about my day. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Who had sent those messages? And why was the phone even up there? The next day, I went back up to grab the phone, but it was gone. I searched everywhere, tore through boxes and old furniture, but it had vanished. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing much happens. Most of the houses are occupied by families or retirees. Across the street from me is a small bungalow that's been empty for years. The previous owner passed away, and no one ever moved in. About 2 weeks ago, I noticed movement in the house. The curtains, which had always been drawn, were open. I could see a faint light flickering inside, like a TV. I figured someone had finally moved in. The next day, I saw someone standing in the window. It was hard to make out their features, but they were tall and motionless, just staring out at the street. I waved, but they didn't respond, just stood there. At night, the light in the window flickered again, like a candle or an old lamp. I told myself it was none of my business, but something about it felt off. A few days later, I decided to introduce myself. I walked over in the afternoon and knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. I peeked through the window, but the house looked empty. No furniture, no signs of life. Just shadows. As I was about to leave, I heard a soft tapping sound from inside. It wasn't coming from the door. It was coming from the window I had just looked through. I turned back, but no one was there. That night, I was woken up by a sound outside. It was faint at first, like leaves rustling, but then it became more deliberate. Footsteps on the pavement. I looked out my bedroom window and saw the figure standing in the middle of the street, directly facing my house. They weren't moving, just standing there, completely still. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, the figure was gone, and the bungalow looked just as empty as it had before. I haven't looked out the window since. It was late, probably close to midnight, and I was driving home from a work trip. The highway was mostly empty, just the occasional pair of headlights passing by in the opposite direction. About halfway through the stretch, I noticed someone standing on the side of the road. A man, dressed in a dark jacket and jeans, his arm stretched out with his thumb up. I don't usually stop for hitchhikers, especially not at night, so I drove past without a second thought. But as I passed him, I glanced in my rearview mirror and froze. He was gone. It didn't make sense. There was nowhere for him to go. The road was bordered by dense trees, and I hadn't seen any cars behind me for miles. Still, I told myself I must have imagined it, and kept driving. A few minutes later, I saw him again. Same man, same dark clothes, standing on the side of the road. This time, he wasn't hitchhiking. He was just standing there, facing the road as my car approached. I drove past him, trying not to look, but my heart was pounding. I checked my mirror again. This time, he was still there, but he was walking. Not toward me, not away from the road, just into the trees. I sped up, trying to shake the uneasy feeling crawling up my spine. 10 minutes later, I saw him a third time. This time, he was standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a stop. My headlights lit him up clearly now. Pale face, blank expression, and something off about his posture. I rolled down the window just enough to yell, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" He didn't answer, just stared at me. I decided I wasn't sticking around to find out what his deal was. I put the car in reverse, planning to turn around and take another route. But the second I glanced in my rearview mirror, he was gone again. I don't remember how I got out of there. All I know is that I didn't stop until I saw the lights of a gas station. I pulled in, heart racing, and parked under the fluorescent glow. I haven't driven that route at night since. When I moved into my new apartment, the landlord mentioned the basement in passing. "There's a storage unit down there for each tenant," he said, handing me a key labeled B7. "But fair warning, it's a little damp." I wasn't planning to store much, so I didn't think about it again until a few weeks later. I'd accumulated a few boxes I didn't need daily access to, so I figured I'd take them down. The basement was exactly what you'd expect. Cold, dimly lit, and smelling faintly of mildew. Rows of metal doors lined the walls, each with a number painted on it. Mine, B7, was near the end of the hall. As I walked, I noticed one of the doors slightly ajar. B12. I could see cardboard boxes stacked inside, along with a few old pieces of furniture. It didn't seem strange at the time. Someone had probably just forgotten to lock it. When I reached my unit, I unlocked it, stacked my boxes inside, and locked up. As I turned to leave, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping. It was coming from inside one of the storage units. I froze, straining to hear. The sound wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. Tap, 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 like someone lightly knocking on wood. "Hello?" I called, my voice echoing in the empty hallway. The tapping stopped. I stood there, waiting, heart pounding. Then, from further down the hall, I heard a door creak open. I turned and saw the door to B12 swinging slightly, as if caught by a draft. The light in the hallway flickered, and I told myself it was just the old wiring. I hurried up the stairs and didn't look back. That night, I dreamed of the basement. In the dream, I was standing in front of B12. The door was open wider now, and the inside was dark. So dark I couldn't see anything, but I could hear breathing. The next morning, I convinced myself I'd overreacted. It was just an old building, probably creaking pipes or something. But when I went downstairs later to grab something from my unit, I noticed something strange. The lock on B12 was gone. Not broken, just gone, as if it had never been there. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pushed the door open. The room was empty. No boxes, no furniture, nothing. Just bare concrete walls and a dirt floor. My wife and I had our first child 3 months ago. We're new parents, so we're hyper alert about everything. We set up a baby monitor in the nursery with both video and audio. It's connected to an app on our phones, so we can check on her even when we're not in the room. A few nights ago, I woke up to a faint crackling sound. It took me a moment to realize it was coming from the baby monitor on my nightstand. At first, I thought it was just static, but then I heard a voice. It was quiet and muffled, but unmistakably human. I sat up, my heart pounding. The screen was dark. It only turns on if the baby makes noise, but the audio feed was live. I turned up the volume, trying to make out the words. "Don't cry. I'm here." It wasn't my wife's voice, and it definitely wasn't mine. I bolted out of bed and ran to the nursery. My daughter was fast asleep in her crib. The room was empty, just as we'd left it. I told myself it had to be some kind of interference. Maybe we picked up a neighbor's monitor or a stray radio signal. I went back to bed, but I couldn't shake the unease. The next night, it happened again. This time, the voice was louder, clearer. "Such a sweet baby." I grabbed my phone and opened the app, watching the live feed. The room looked normal. Nothing was out of place. But then, as I stared at the screen, I saw it. The rocking chair in the corner of the room was moving, slowly, back and forth. I ran to the nursery again, but by the time I got there, the chair was still, and my daughter was undisturbed. The next morning, I checked the app's playback feature. It records short clips when it detects movement or sound. Sure enough, there was a clip from the night before. In the video, the chair was moving. But what made my stomach drop was the shadow. There was a faint, human-shaped shadow on the wall near the crib. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't my wife's. We've since moved the baby monitor into our bedroom. The nursery stays locked at night.